Hello, everyone. Welcome to this Radcast. I am Jamin Shively, honored to be joined here in person with Professor Guy McPherson. Welcome, Guy.
And we're also joined by Fawkes, who today is coming from across the pond, as they say.
Yeah. Wonderful. Awesome. Great to see you, Fawkes. Great to see you, Guy. So today we're gonna talk about radicalism. And I'm going to really turn it over to Guy and Fawkes to lead this.
So many people hear radical and they think extremist, and the term really has been co-opted by the culture and turned into something that it's not. So radicalism is not terrorism, it's not extremism.
The Latin root of the word radical is radix, which means root. So for example, when we talk about radical Islamic extremism or something like this, it should probably be more accurately called something like superficial, because there's in no way where they're getting to the root of any problems.
Most people see this symbol and they know what it does, but they don't know its name. And its name is radical. It gets to the root. And that's completely consistent with the definition of the word radical. It gets to the root. So this symbol, which when I showed on chalkboard and asked college students what it is, they tell me it's a square root symbol. Okay, well, that's what it does. What is it called? Well, it's called a radical because it actually gets to the root. And it's not always a square root symbol. It's a square root when it's expressed this way. When it's expressed this way, it's the same as having a 2 there. So we just do it without the 2.
And so thank you, Guy.
And it was also an example of anarchism. It's another one of those words, anarchy, that people confuse with another word, chaos. Chaos is the absence of rules. Anarchy is the absence of rulers. It's a completely different thing. So I would use classroom anarchy or classroom anarchism. I typically say anarchism anymore because people don't have the slightest idea what I'm talking about if I say anarchy, and they're confused and they think it's chaos. Anarchism allows us to take responsibility for ourselves and also for our neighbors.
Yeah. So yeah, the anarchy part of it, which I'm just now really starting to get more and more enlightened on. There was something that you said that made me just get it, that even after listening to hours of Noam Chomsky, I hadn't quite gotten. And I think that's because you defined it. You stated clearly what it is and what it isn't. So, Fawkes and I have been coming at this from the standpoint of collective intelligence independently, and also focused on climate change and the destruction of the planet. And the fact that we're all intersecting on both those planes and bringing those planes together and saying, if there is any hope for getting out of this beyond words dire predicament of abrupt climate change leading to near-term human extinction, we believe that to the extent that humans have a part to play in this, collective intelligence will be a just crucial part.
Well, the hierarchical top-down relying upon authorities for the intelligence certainly hasn't worked to this point.
Absolutely. And just as you mentioned that, I'm realizing the extent to which, as a kid and as a young man, I just kind of had this faith in, those 5-star generals and Joint Chiefs of Staff and CIA, that they really had our best interests at heart and they really had things figured out. And, our part is just to make sure we have the right president, so he, brings in the right generals and everything will be great, right? And I'm just realizing the extent to which I actually believed that, right? It's kind of embarrassing to say, but I felt that. I mean, it was, I grew up watching astronauts landing on the moon and thinking, wow, organized America with that American flag, that's the shit.
Of course, we're all born into captivity and we hear from our parents and all the other adult figures around us that there's one way to live and we're number one. The old, the same old American exceptionalism line that had been going on for a couple hundred years when we showed up, and just marches on. That we are actually different than everybody else in the world, and this culture is the only way to live, and blah, blah, blah. Why would we not believe that?
Exactly. No, and it was ingrained in us through the public education system. I pledge allegiance to the flag, blah, 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 you know, and it was hammered into us. That's the whole point of the education system, is indoctrination.
Absolutely. It is an indoctrination process. I refer to it as the K through 12 concentration camps, or occasionally the K through 12 indoctrination facilities, because that's really what's going on there. It's repetitive use of this is the only way to live. The dominant paradigm, the infinite growth paradigm, whatever you want to call it, is the way to be. It's the only way to be. And if you think any differently, you probably belong in a homeschooled situation. You know, you certainly don't belong here with us, the exceptional us. So I especially appreciate something called unlearning. There's this homeschool approach called unlearning. I think you have to unlearn a lot of things before you can actually learn something of significance. And that's tough because we've been indoctrinated, we've been enculturated with a certain set of ideas. And we have to unlearn, we have to let go of some of those things before we can adopt a new approach. And of course that's hard because, you know, as we've already mentioned, we grew up under this system and hearing these same things. And mostly just assuming those things. You don't even have to hear them. They're just embedded within the language, just as anarchy and radicalism come with sort of tainted meaning to most people. It's not because anybody ever looks at the definition. It's because the opposite. They just assume and everybody thinks that it's going a different direction, right? And that's so difficult because we have all this baggage and we create attachments to these ideas. And why would we not, especially when we have this enormous privilege that all of us have enjoyed basically since birth.
Yes, I was just saying that, you know, the nationalism of which we've been speaking, you know, go America, go France or whatever, is dependent upon an ideological apparatus that essentially enrolls us in these, you know, these different ways of identifying, not with the whole, but with this or that part of the world.
That's right. And that narrowing down, that winnowing out of information makes us less than whole and makes our approach less than holistic. And that's what we're trying to do here, is to seek a holistic response instead of this a little bit here and a little bit there kind of approach that is so common and so rewarded in the academic system, probably in the corporate system. I don't know much about that.
Definitely.
Certainly
No
in the nonprofit system, and I've
Yeah.
spent a little time there. And it's all really compartmentalized.
Yeah.
And that's what we're trying to avoid with these conversations.
Right. I think those connections are often subterranean. Rooting down is where we find the interconnectedness, the rhizomic nature of these connections is profound.
Absolutely right. And that brings up another interesting point. We think of roots, tree roots in this case, as being part of a tree, and they just go down into the soil and they extract moisture and nutrients. But in fact, as is the case with our individual lives, the trees depend upon a whole bunch of other organisms to take in that water and those nutrients. There's a bunch of mycorrhizae there, a bunch of other organisms attached to those roots that greatly facilitate the tree's ability to extract that material and therefore survive. And we're the same way. We depend upon myriad other organisms for our own survival. And yet we tend to think of me as being separate from you and our species as being somehow separate and superior to other species. And it's small wonder we have these daunting problems when we so easily separate between us as individuals and between us as a species and all the other species. I mean, obviously that's going to go to some place that we aren't going to appreciate.
Yeah.
And so here we are.
So we're talking about the definition of what it means to be radical. And so I suppose it's not too far of a stretch to say that our intention is not only to be radical, but to radicalize, you know, our audience, so that together, as a whole, we can, you know, get to the root of that which ails us.
That's an excellent point. We are actually attempting to radicalize our audience. I was radicalized from a fairly young age, and I have no idea how I got there. I spent most of my academic career trying to radicalize the people I was in contact with, most notably the students. I was trying to get them to get to the root of various issues. And it's a difficult task because, as we've already talked about, this unlearning that must go on. Somehow, though, there are plenty of people, we all know many people in our own lives who are in fact radicals, whether they even know what the word means or not, who are willing to dig deep into a subject, who are willing to take a holistic approach, a transdisciplinary approach even, to dealing with problems. So I'm not sure how we get to that point, but there are those of us who are exhibiting those characteristics, which leads to the notion of collective intelligence as a better approach than what we've been doing for the last few hundred years.
Yeah, and to add to the radicalizing point you gentlemen were talking about a moment ago, you know, I just anecdotally, I gave one of the keynote speeches at Earth Day in San Francisco, and I opened up, as to paraphrase Harvey Milk from decades past, "My name is Jamin Shively, and I am here to radicalize you." And you know, that's of course, it's, you know, it's a metaphor, it's this, it's that. But the point, but what a key point is that radicalizing is something that we do. And it's just really funny how in the conservative media they talk about, oh, they're trying to radicalize, you know, young people in the United States, you know, as if that's like a bad thing. Well, you know, that's why I come out and say I'm here to radicalize you. Let's be, and that's how I opened up at the class when I addressed the classroom at the University of Washington yesterday. Anyway, yeah, we are here to radicalize. Back to you, Fawkes or Guy.
Sure. Well, I think that's a perfect place to start, and I'm happy to hear that Guy is taking this in the direction of collective intelligence, precisely because I think our individual identities are often based precisely because of the way they were formed on this, you know, not nationalistic, you know, manifest destiny. That somehow that sense of identity, that of the individual, the bourgeois ideology that props up the state apparatus and the capitalistic mode of production, that is worthy of dying for. when in fact, if you root down, we see that in fact, even our very sense of individuality is dependent upon the collective to begin with. So in a sense, collective intelligence is simply synonymous with getting to the root, right? Getting to our own roots.
What you said is so inspiring because here's my point. Your identity radically transforms, radically shifts, radically changes depending on the context that you're in, depending on the game that you're playing. What you just said, Fawkes, about how our identity, it's a byproduct of this game that we've been growing up in and just immersed in like a fish in water, you know, of manifest destiny. Pardon me?
Right? It's a finite game that, you know, we play to win, and necessarily, right, in order to win, we have to beat the other. And it's also in and of itself a form of self-deception, not really realizing where we're coming from as individuals, the fact that we are rooted in the collectivity.
Okay. Yeah.
Yeah, if you're going to win, that means there has to be an other that loses. And so what do we do particularly well in this culture? We identify others as being other, as being different. Oh, those people have a bald spot right there. Those people all wear glasses. Those people. It's all about them. It's always it's this us them mentality. Whatever they're doing it wrong. We got this figured.
Yes, totally, totally, totally. So that's the identity that has emerged from this game that was forced on us in this concentration camp that we were born into, right? And indoctrinated in. I pledge allegiance. I pledge to be separate. I pledge to see myself as separate from everyone else. I pledge to compete. I pledge to associate individuality with hoarding. You are what you own. Oh, that guy, he's worth in excess of $1 billion. Well, I'm only worth $10,000, so shit. I guess I really, shit. As opposed to I am me, right? And I walk the earth however I walk the earth, right? But I am a naked man. And I'm grateful for my glasses and my clothing, but I am me, as opposed to I am all this hoarding. I mean, wow. So we formed these just ultra twisted identities, right? Think of a little kid growing up in a brothel, heaven forbid. The twisted, warped view of the world, he or she is going to have growing up. That's who we are. We're these twisted, warped, born into this just wicked concentration camp of beatings and of, schedule. And now you get up and now you go to sleep. And, my God. And so we've grown up really, really warped. This is Ender's Game, this famous science fiction book by Orson Scott Card in real life. Welcome to Ender's Game.
When it really comes down to who we are, that's a pretty thin veneer, right? This sense of self that comes from one's identity being defined by simply not being the other. Well, who am I? Well, I'm not Japanese. I'm not black. I'm not brown. I'm not yellow. It's this sort of twisted, Jamen, to use your word, right? This deformed sense of self, I think. Whereas deep down, this sense of self comes from something deeper, right? It comes from an entire system that's reinforcing this sort of, self-aggrandizement and a certain sense of competition that is in no way playful. Right, it's not the competition of the soccer football field, right? Rather, it's one's very self that's at stake, precisely because one is blind to the fact, one represses the fact that at a deeper level, we all essentially hail from Mother Earth.
Yes, we are one. We tend to forget that. And the differences we accentuate in pointing out others are things we have no control over. I don't know about you, but I didn't pick the location of my birth. I didn't pick the time of my birth. I didn't choose my parents. I just showed up on February 29th, 1960 to teachers in Northern Idaho. And for better and worse, that contributed to me being here, enjoying this enormous privilege. There might have been many, many, many other people born the same day. In fact, there were, in different locations around the world, to different parents, and their lives turned out completely differently as a result of those factors over which we had no control. I was born into privilege. I was born into captivity. I recognize both of them.
That's it. Well, gentlemen, before we wrap, I just want to say that for me, this is the beginning of a radical revolution. This is how revolutions start, except instead of starting in a coffee shop in a metropolitan city, it's starting online. And that's one thing that's radically different about this revolution, is that it creates a global campfire where everyone can show up at any time. And you can also go off and form little groups and work on specific things and then reintegrate them into the whole. That's at the root of radical collective intelligence. The parts, the amino acids, and then the final assembly into the whole. So we'll be reading down on all this, but I just want to say, I want to express my profound gratitude to the both of you and to all creatures and beings, past, present, and future, who have culminated in this moment. Right, the shoulders upon whom we stand, so I couldn't be more excited about where we're taking it because this will be the radical revolution of planet Earth, which is so desperately needed in order for us to save whatever can be saved of our fragile and dying world.